Hey guys, before we get into today's video, I just want to say thank you guys so much for the views and subscriptions this past month. My channel has been going absolutely insane, gaining nearly 300 subscribers and having nearly 12,000 views on my videos. I am so grateful, and I think I'm going to be doing a live stream for a 1,000 subscriber special. And if anyone, actually joins, then I'm going to be doing a sort of Q&A, answering any questions in chat, or just talking about any topics that people want to talk about. And if that doesn't work out, then I'm going to be reviewing the comments, which I'm going to do both of these things, but I'm going to review the comments on my video of why I'm no longer a Christian for sure, because there are, let's say, some very interesting comments on that video, and also there are just a ton of comments on that video. It's just been like a stream of comments like all day the past month, and there's no way I have time to just sit there and reply to all of them. So I want to seriously reply to some and laugh at a lot of them because there are just a lot of crazy comments on there. I think I'm going to be hitting 1,000 subscribers maybe by the time this video is uploaded, but for sure by this weekend. And so I'm going to be releasing another shorter video about a date and time of when that live stream is going to be happening, and then I'm going to be actually live streaming. So hope you guys come and hang out. It's going to be so much fun. Now, on to today's video. First, I want to start out with a disclaimer that I do not condone the buying, selling, using, or any other recommendation of any illegal drug. This video is purely for educational purposes only. As you've seen from the title of this video, I'm going to be talking about my own experiences with psychedelics and how they have allowed me to rediscover spirituality. I have had a handful of low psilocybin doses in the past year and one small dose of LSD. But before I get into talking about those experiences, I first want to talk about the more objective scientific side of psychedelics, because there's actually been a lot of scientific research done on these, and a great book recommendation that I have for you guys is called Psychedelic Medicine. I'm probably going to be putting it on the screen like right here. And this book is really good. The author is a PhD scientist, and he brings on PhD scientists who were actually in charge of psychedelic studies with psilocybin, LSD, ayahuasca, and MDMA. And he just sort of interviews them and asks them about the studies, and it is a great way to learn about all the science behind this. Now, I obviously don't have time to share all the scientific evidence in this video, and that's not really what this video is about, but I do want to share some of the objective science that tends to be common amongst all of these psychedelic studies. And some of those common effects are a treating of anxiety, depression, PTSD, and addiction. And these effects on these mental health issues tend to last upwards to 6 months to a year. They haven't really kept up with people past that point in scientific studies, but just the fact that you can have one strong psychedelic experience, mind you, this is with trained professionals and professional therapists guiding you through the trip, but having one session can reduce people's anxiety, depression, PTSD, and even get rid of those effects and get rid of people's addictions for up to 6 months after the fact is just absolutely insane. Because if you think about depression and anxiety medicine, PTSD medicine that's used today, it's by big pharma, is typically things that are taken every single day. On top of treating those conditions, people tend to have big spiritual or mystical experiences on psychedelics, and these experiences are so profound that people will often rank them as the #1 event that has ever happened to them in their entire life. People will rank it above getting married and the birth of their firstborn child, which is absolutely insane. It just goes to show how profound and amazing that these experiences can be. But also on the flip side, some people have really, really bad experiences. I remember reading about one study where it was something like 75 to 80% of people had very profound mystical experiences, and the remaining people had just very what's called a bad trip and very anxiety filled trip, and it was a horrible time for them. But even for the people who had these bad trips, still reported after the fact that this was a very impactful and important experience in their life. So people tend to describe these deeply mystical experiences in very similar ways. People tend to feel a sense of openness. People tend to feel a sense of oneness with all things. They feel full of love, and they are filled with an incredible sense of meaning and purpose in this experience. So some of the things that are happening in the brain is psychedelics suppress certain parts of the brain and then sort of ramp up other parts of the brain. And it also breaks down the barrier between parts of the brain that typically don't communicate with each other. So what you'll see when somebody is on psychedelics is the part of your brain that is responsible for hearing starts talking to the part of your brain that's responsible for sight. And that typically doesn't happen outside of a psychedelic experience. And this is why you'll see people report that when they're listening to music on psychedelics, they can actually see the music. And I've read experiences of they were listening to this classical music, and music came and showed them each little bit of the orchestra that was playing, and this person just said it was an incredibly beautiful and profound experience. And that's sort of the science behind that sort of objectifies that experience, right? Because we know that that's happening in the brain. Those two parts of the brain that typically don't communicate are talking to each other. And then psychedelics also suppress parts of the brain like the default mode network, which is typically regarded as responsible for our ego. And our ego is our identity that gets just built up or created over years of experience. And this is how we create an identity for ourselves. And so for myself, right, I'm Chase, I'm an atheist, I'm a YouTuber, I'm a son, I'm a friend, I do these things, I don't do these things, I think this way, I don't like those people who think that way. And that's sort of our ego talking. It's this identity. And it's very important evolutionarily, right? Because it's really important for survival. You think this way, you do these things, and you fit into this tribe, and this tribe helps you to survive, and you work together, and you reward each other, right? You give each other love, compassion, and community, and sociability. And so our ego is really important in that aspect. Our ego is really bad, however, for our spiritual side, because our ego tends to make us look at people in all of the ways in which they are separate from us, whereas psychedelics sort of breaks down those barriers and allows you to see people in the ways in which they're the same as you. And now I want to get into my own personal experience with psychedelics. See, I don't have PTSD, anxiety, depression, or addiction, so I don't really have anything that I can relate to with that. And I haven't taken any big doses yet, so I haven't had any sort of mind-blowing experience. I've read about people, getting blasted off into these new dimensions, and where they learn from these interdimensional beings, and they see all these fractals and colors and light. I personally haven't experienced anything like that yet. I have, however, still had very deep spiritual experiences. I've felt all of those things of a oneness with everything, and a love for everything, and a dissolution of the ego. And I've had this experience where I learned that the only thing that exists is this moment right now. Like the smallest amount of time that you can break up into, it's like that moment is the only moment that exists. And the best way that I can explain this is my LSD experience, where I was not worried at all about the past. I wasn't thinking about the past, wasn't worrying about it. I wasn't worrying about the future. Nothing about the future was important to me. It wasn't even a concept in my mind. And so I was fully in the present moment. And then while I was in the present moment, there was no filters in which I was seeing the world, because I wasn't basing anything that I was seeing off past experiences or thinking about the future of what it might become. And I was just fully in the present moment. And I realized that when you're fully in the present moment and there's no filters in which you're seeing the world, the only thing that can exist is love. And, because I was thinking to myself, like, what else could exist? It's like, could I be angry at a person right now? Well, no. How could I be angry with a person in that moment? Because there was no past concepts in which I was applying to this person, nothing that they had done to me or oh, I know that how they act, I know that they do these things, or no projection of the future, worrying about who they might become or what they might do to me. And so there was no filters in which I would be able to look at a person and say, I'm angry at you. All I could do was look at a person and just realize that they are a being, and the only choice I have is to love them. But then what tends to happen is you come down from your trip, right? And everything sort of goes back to normal. And at that point, I didn't really know how to integrate any of these concepts into my life. I didn't know how to integrate this oneness and love for all things and dissolution of my ego and living fully in the present moment. That was until a friend introduced me to Ram Dass. And if you don't know who Ram Dass is, he was a Harvard professor in the 50s who had many, many, many profound psychedelic experiences, and he even participated and led some psychedelic studies through Harvard, but psychedelics ended up becoming taboo and illegal, and Ram Dass was eventually fired from Harvard. But he was still incredibly inspired and motivated by these psychedelic experiences that he had had, so he then traveled to India, which led him to meeting a guru, his guru, and he stayed in a temple in India for nearly a year where he was taught about Hinduism and Buddhism, which then after that he ended up coming back to the United States and doing just a ton of lectures about all the things that he had learned and everything that he had experienced. Ram Dass was able to go beyond the chemical experience of psychedelics and integrate all of these concepts into his everyday life, and this absolutely fascinated me, which led me to just consuming every piece of Ram Dass content that I could find, every YouTube video, every podcast, all of his books written about Ram Dass, and I took all of these ideas and started integrating them into my own life. See, I knew that the things that Ram Dass were saying were true because I had experienced them myself, and so I was completely open to all of the things that he was saying and all these weird sort of spiritual practices that I was like, is that really going to do anything for me? I was like, well, I'll just give it a shot and see what happens. And so I started to do yoga, I started to meditate, I started to do breath work, I started to journal and just study a whole lot, studying Ram Dass, studying different forms of Buddhism and Hinduism, different forms of breath work, different forms of meditation, and just all of these things that would help me to integrate these psychedelic experiences into my everyday life. And I feel as though I have largely succeeded in that endeavor. You know, I try my best to look at everyone in a loving way. I try to see the oneness of all things. I try to get rid of my ego. I try to fully live in the present moment. And do I still mess up? Oh, yeah, of course. I fall back into my ego all the time. I judge people. I get angry with people. But Ram Dass describes this phenomena as falling asleep. And just like falling asleep at nighttime, eventually you wake back up, right? And you realize, oh, hey, I was living in my ego again. And there's sort of these spiritual practices that you can develop. One of those is developing awareness, which allows you to shorten the time between falling asleep and waking back up again. And you sort of have these triggers for yourself, right? Like, I fall back into my ego, I get angry with somebody, but then the very act of starting to get angry triggers something in me that says, ah, yes, there I go, starting to get angry again. And what does that do? That allows me to just stop, and it allows me to disconnect myself from this anger that I'm feeling and see it just as an emotion that I'm feeling, and then I'm able to just let it pass. And I can sort of look at myself in this cosmic humor, laughing way, and as Ram Dass would probably say, oh, there I go getting angry again. That's far out. Anyways, that's how I have rediscovered spirituality through psychedelics. They have led me to Ram Dass, which have led me to integrating all of these spiritual practices into my life, where I try to focus on love and oneness and getting rid of my ego and living fully in the eternal present moment. And if you're interested in learning more about these spiritual concepts, I obviously recommend Ram Dass because that's who I've been talking about, but I also recommend Alan Watts, I recommend Muji Baba, and I recommend Eckhart Tolle. And if you know of any other spiritual teachers who teach sort of similar things along these lines, drop them down in the comment section below, because I would love to listen to them. And I will leave links for these spiritual teachers down in the description below, so you can go and check them out. And thank you guys so much for watching. That's all I have for today. So I will see you in the next one, probably my 1,000 subscriber live stream. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.